All right, 3, 2, 1, and we are live once again. Welcome back to HeroQuest fans on the super long, triumphant return Friday night stream. So I've already overdone it. I meant to just do the 2 to 4 p.m. stream, but I had so much to say and I was so excited to be back. We went until 7, so I have more to say. But tomorrow is our game day, and next Thursday we plan to do the Rantcast, so I will be back on the Rantcast. But anyway, I just wanted to share a couple things quick. I didn't get to this in the last stream, but check this out. So we've got, this is of course one of the Guardian Knights for the remake HeroQuest. See how it's got the round base, so that's different than the square bases of the classic HeroQuest. So you can see there's a difference in size there. But check this out. This is like in the style, you can buy lots of these online. This is in the style of the Games Workshop slotted base for their miniatures, so like 1992, 95. Check this out. It's the same size. It's almost even the same thickness. So if you're looking for a miniature to create a proxy, just get like Reaper Bones plastic and then just cut the base off with your razor blade and then just get some of these. Just glue that on there. You might have to put some putty or something in there, or just you could leave a little tab, just glue it on there, paint it the same color, and ta-da, you got it. So anyway, just a little tip. Also, I wanted to show you, remember how I was showing off the miniatures from the European HeroQuest set? Definitely check out our VOD there. Thank you again to the generous guy on Board Game Geek who sold me the European HeroQuest sets at a really awesome bargain price, shipped all the way from the UK. Okay. This is the Ogre, let's see, Ogre Champion from Against the Ogre Horde European pack. This is the Ogre from the ElfQuest pack, Mage of the Mirror. Notice the difference in color. Dramatic, isn't it? This almost looks black. This is like a dark navy blue, midnight blue. This is almost like a cornflower. If you're, you've got the Crayola crayons, kind of a purplish, grayish blue. But these were the 10 body point ogres. For comparison, let me show you. Oh yeah, this one is missing an arm, but this is like the Ogre Warriors from Against the Ogre Horde European pack. So you get 3 different colors. And just to show you that it's not actually black, let's look at an actual black ogre. One of the cool guys on Yield In sold this to me. This is a black ogre. See the difference in color? So there's black versions of all the HeroQuest figures. If you can find them online, they're actually really cheap compared to like the originals. But I think the quality is just as good. I guess these were like extras at the factory that like people just walked away with, employees just took them home as souvenirs, and then they've given them away at like conventions and things. But yeah, I think they look really cool. But yeah, so got plenty of ogres. Just wanted to show you those. And remember I was showing you those undead figures from the European packs? So I also have, like, look how white that is. It's so whitey. But it's got the bezel on the edge. There's another European mummy. These are all European mummies. Look at the variance in color. So there were definitely variations out there. Oop, and our camera just lost connectivity. Sorry about that. Let me fix that here. I don't know. I made the mistake of updating OBS, so it's giving me some BS now. Also got some camera died. That's so weird. See, I shouldn't be having these hardware problems. It could be the USB device I'm using. Like it's not getting enough power somehow. But here's North American zombie, North American zombie, European zombie. Look how white that is. So this is what they would look like if I ran them through the hydrogen peroxide in the sun. But I kind of like the ones that I've got that are all like tarnished and yellowed. They kind of look cool, I think. Let me just grab one to show you, and then I'm going to get into the Lord of the Rings story time. Alright, so here is one of the ones that I just bought. Look how yellowed it is. But I think it looks kind of cool because you can see more of the detail. It's kind of beat up, kind of banged up. And that's just from yellowing of the plastic. So I don't know, I kind of like it. It's almost like someone did a wash, like a yellowish brown, reddish brown wash on him. But yeah, I could make him look like this, but I kind of like that. So anyway, just wanted to share that. All right, so as you can see, this is the this is from the Millennium Collection, Lord of the Rings. This is actually the appendices. I lost the camera. Well, if it just does a still store camera, rocket number 9, doesn't matter because I'm just going to be reading. So this is mostly like what happened after Return of the King, but there's some other stuff in here about like what happened right before and some of the ancient history. So this is Tolkien did release this to the public. So the appendices to the Return of the King was out there, but this was not. This, and of course there's many different editions of this. Christopher Tolkien, his son, who is now passed on, was the executor of his estate. He managed all the Lord of the Rings stuff. He edited together his father's notes for the background of the world and released it as a Silmarillion. And people were like, what is this? This is boring. This is just like a textbook. This is a history book. This is not an adventure. But nevertheless, this, for the longest time, let's see, I want to say 77 is when it came out. This is second edition. 77. The Trust. Oh, okay, so then 99 was the last time. Okay. But anyway, this was the background of Lord of the Rings for everybody who wanted to know, who wanted to read more. So I guess to put it in terms of like this, if this were Star Wars, this would be like the guide to the universe or whatever. This would be that thing that Strange of Us was reading. But unlike, I mean, that was created, cobbled together after the stories existed. This was like unpublished notes, basically, that his son edited together and tried to release like after his death. So if Tolkien had lived on, he probably either never would have released this or he would have reworked it heavily into like an actual book. But anyway, so from what I understand about this Rings of Power, there's 3 episodes out. I have not seen it, so I can't make a definitive statement about it. But the main character appears to be Galadriel. And I really liked Galadriel. I especially liked the portrayal of Galadriel that Cate Blanchett did in the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies. And that, to me, is like the definitive version of the character. She's wise, she's strong, she's good in elven lore, so like magic, essentially. She's like a seer, she's like a prophet, she's like all these things. And yeah, she's beautiful, but her wisdom and her power is not in force of arms. Now, if you're talking about the history, well, how did she get that way? Was she born that way, or did she have to earn it? So, I've seen a couple clips from the new show, and like out of context, kind of gives you a certain impression. But anyway, I just look, since I'm treating this as a reference book, I'm just looking up references to Galadriel, and I'm going to read you some stuff about it. So the first time she's mentioned in this particular edition, this is the second edition, and this is Del Rey, so the Del Rey version, page 61, and it's talking of Eldamar. So all these genealogies of chapter 5 of Eldmar and the princes of the Eldali. So, in the time of the hosts of the Vanyar and the Noldor, came to the last western shores of the Hitherlands. In the north, these shores, in the ancient days after the Battle of the Powers, bent ever westward, until in the northernmost parts of the Arda, only a narrow sea divided Aman, upon which Valinor was built, from the Hitherlands. But this narrow sea was filled with grinding ice because of the violence of the frosts of Melkor. Because Melkor is like the evil guy. Therefore, Arome did not lead the hosts of the Eldali into the far north, but brought them to the fair lands about the river Sirion, that afterwards was named Beleriand. And from those shores whence first the Eldar looked in fear and wonder on the sea, there stretched an ocean, wide and dark and deep, between them and the mountains of Aman. Now keep in mind, there's probably recordings out there of Tolkien himself pronouncing these words the right way or the way he intended. I'm not even trying. I'm just reading. So anyway, I'm going to skip ahead. That was page 56. I'm going to skip ahead to the first reference to Galadriel in this book. All right, down the paragraph. The sons of Finarfin were Finrod the Faithful, who was afterwards named Felagund, Lord of Caves, Orodreth, Anagrod, and Anagnor. These four were as close in friendship with the sons of Fingolfin as though they were all brothers. A sister they had, Galadriel, most beautiful of all the house of Finwë. Her hair was lit with gold, as though it had caught in a mesh the radiance of Lorelin. Okay, so that's her introduction. And then we skip ahead to page 90. Let me just see. So they're talking about the Silmarils, or these jewels. So before the Rings of Power. And this is actually taking place in I think it's the First Age. The First Age is like the creation of Middle-earth. I may be getting the terms wrong, but yeah, the First Age. And then the Second Age is where the Rings of Power TV show is supposed to take place. The action takes place. And then the Third Age begins right when, at the time that Aragorn ascends the throne, I believe. That's what happens, the Third Age. All right. Okay, I'm going to start at the top of the page of 90. There's a lot of context I'm skipping here. They're talking about the lies of Melkor and Morgoth. I'm going to have to read this whole thing. They say the first 80 pages are the hardest to get through. It's very dense. Okay, so page 90. Then Feanor swore a terrible oath. His 7 sons leapt straightway to his side and took the selfsame vow together, and red as blood shone their drawn swords in the glare of the torches. They swore an oath which none shall break, and none should take, by the name even of Iluvatar, calling the everlasting dark upon them if they kept it not. And Manwë they named in witness, and Varda, and the hallowed mountain of Tanaquetel, vowing to pursue with vengeance and hatred to the ends of the world Vala, demon, elf, or man, as yet unborn, or any creature great or small, good or evil, the time should bring forth unto the end of days, whoso should hold, or take, or keep a Silmaril from their possession. Thus spoke Maedhros, and Malgor, and Celegorm, Curufin, and Caranthir, Amrod, and Amris, princes of the Noldor, and many quail to hear the dread words. For so sworn, good or evil, an oath may not be broken, and it shall pursue oath-keeper and oath-breaker to the world's end. Fingolfin and Turgon his son therefore spoke against Feanor, and fierce words awoke, so that once again wrath came near to the edge of swords. But Finarfin spoke softly, as was his wont, and sought to calm the Noldor. persuading them to pause and ponder ere deeds were done that could not be undone. And Ordrath, alone of his sons, spoke in like manner. Finrod was with Tugor, his friend, but Galadriel, the only woman of Noldor to stand that day tall and valiant among the contending princes, was eager to be gone. No oaths she swore, but the words of Feanor concerning Middle-earth had kindled in her heart, for she yearned to see the wide unguarded lands, and to rule there a realm at her own will. Of like mind with Galadriel was Fingor, Fingolfin's son, being moved also by Feanor's words, though he loved him little. And with Fingon stood, as they ever did, Angrod and Agenor, sons of Finarfin. But these held their peace and spoke not against their fathers. So there's all this about dread oaths being taken. All right, so skipping ahead, skipping lots of context. Let's go to page 130. This is of the Return of the Noldor. This is chapter 13 of the Silmarillion. Down the paragraph in the Del Rey edition, down the bottom of the page. Okay, now on a time, Finrod and Galadriel his sister were the guests of Thingol, their kinsman in Doriath. Then Finrod was filled with wonder at the strength and majesty of Menegroth, its treasuries and armories, and its many-pillared halls of stone. And it came into his heart that he would build wide halls behind ever-guarded gates in some deep and secret place beneath the hills. Therefore he opened his heart to Thingol, telling him of his dreams, and Thingol spoke to him of the deep gorge of the river Narog, and the caves under the high Feroth and its steep western shore. And when he departed, he gave him guides to lead him to the place of which few yet knew. Thus Finrod came to the caverns of Narog, and began to establish there deep halls and armories, after the fashion of the mansions of Menegroth. And that stronghold was called Nergothrond. In that labor Finrod was aided by the dwarves of the Blue Mountains. And they were rewarded well, for Finrod had brought more treasures out of Tirion than any other of the princes of Noldor. I'm going to pause here. I remember the Blue Mountains from War in the North, the game. You got really good armor and weapons from the Blue Mountains. Yep. In that time was made for him the Naglamir, the necklace of the dwarves, most renowned of their works in the elder days. It was a carcanet of gold, and set therein were gems uncounted from Valinor. But it had a power within it, so that it rested lightly on its wearer as a strand of flax, and whatsoever neck it clasped, it sat always with grace and loveliness. There in Nergothrond, Finrod made his home with many of his people, and he was named in the tongues of the dwarves Felagund, hewer of caves, and that name he bore thereafter until his end. But Finrod Felagund was not the first to dwell in the caves beside the river Narog. Galadriel his sister went not with him to Nergothrond, for in Doriath dwelt Celeborn, kinsman of Thingol, and there was great love between them. Therefore she remained in the hidden kingdom and abode with Melian, and of her learned great lore and wisdom concerning Middle-earth. So whenever they talk about lore, we're supposed to understand it's not just stories, but also, like, in other contexts, what you call magic craft or skill. Lore and wisdom. Okay, so she learned it there from Melian. And that's about the time she met her future husband, Celeborn. All right, let me just see. All right, so then we skip ahead. Next, this is in chapter 15, which is of the Noldor in Beleriand. And in the Del Rey edition, it's page 147, I believe. Let me just double check this here. Basically, what I did is just use the index, the helpful index, because it's written like a textbook. And it's all made up, imaginary. Galadriel, page 147. Okay, so down the paragraph, let's see. Now, while the city of Gondolin was building in secret, Finrod Felagund wrought in the deep places of Nergothrond. But Galadriel his sister dwelt, as has been told, in Thingol's realm and Doriath. And at times Melian and Galadriel would speak together of Valinor and the bliss of old. But beyond the dark hour of the death of the trees, Galadriel would not go, but ever fell silent. And on a time Melian said, "There is some woe that lies upon you and your kin, that I can see in you, but all else is hidden from me. For by no vision or thought can I perceive anything that passed or passes in the west. A shadow lies over all the land of Aman, and reaches far out over the sea. Why will you not tell me more?" "For that woe is past," said Galadriel, "and I would take that what joy is here left untroubled by memory. And maybe there is woe enough yet to come, though still hope may seem bright." Then Melian looked in her eyes and said, "I believe not that the Noldor came forth as messengers of the Valar, as was said at first, not though they came in the very hour of our need. Not though they came in the very hour of our need, for they speak never of the Valar, nor have their high lords brought any message to Thingol, whether from Manwë or Ulmo, or even from Alwë the king's brother, and his own folk that went over the sea. For that cause, Galadriel, were the high people of the Noldor driven forth as exiles from Aman. Or what evil lies on the sons of Feanor, that they are so haughty and so fell? Do I not strike near the truth?" "Near," said Galadriel, "save that we were not driven forth, but came of our own will, and against that of the Valar. And though great peril and in despite of the Valar, for this purpose we came, to take vengeance upon Morgoth, and regain what he stole." Then Galadriel spoke to Melian of the Silmarils, and of the slaying of King Fanwë at Formenos. But still she said no word of the oath, nor of the kin slaying, nor of the burning of the ships at Losgar. But Melian said, "How much you tell me, and yet more I perceive. A darkness you would cast over the long road from Tirion. But I see evil there, which Thingol should learn for his guidance." "Maybe," said Galadriel, "but not of me." And Melian spoke then no more of these matters with Galadriel. But she told to King Thingol all that she had heard of the Silmarils. "This is a great matter," she said, "greater indeed than the Noldor themselves understand, for the light of Aman and the fate of Arda," so Arda is the name for the world, I picked that up, "for the light of Aman and the fate of Arda lie locked now in these things, the work of Feanor who is gone. They shall not be recovered, I foretell, by any power of the Eldar, and the world shall be broken in battles that are to come, ere they are wrested from Morgoth. See now, Feanor they have slain, and many another, as I guess, but first of all the deaths they have brought, and yet shall bring, was Finwë your friend. Morgoth slew him ere he fled from Aman." Then Thingol was silent, being filled with grief and foreboding. But at length he said, "Now at last I understand the coming of the Noldor out of the west, of which I wondered much before. Not to our aid did they come, save by chance. For those that remain in Middle-earth, the Valar will leave to their own devices until the uttermost need. For vengeance and redress of their loss the Noldor came, yet all the more sure shall they be as allies against Morgoth, with whom it is not now to be thought that they will ever make treaty." But Melian said, "Truly for these causes they came, but for others also. Beware of the sons of Feanor. The shadow Of the wrath of the Valar lies upon them. They have done evil, I perceive, both in Aman and to their own kin. A grief, but lulling to sleep, lies between the princes of Noldor. And Thingol answered, What is that to me? Of Feanor I have heard but report, which makes him great indeed. Of his sons I hear little to my pleasure, yet they are likely to prove the deadliest foes of our foe. Their swords and their counsels shall have two edges, said Melian, and afterwards they spoke no more of this matter. All right. Back to the index. So next we pick up 151, the end of this chapter. Then the sons of Finarfin departed from Menegroth with heavy hearts, perceiving how the words of Mandos would ever be made true, and that none of the Noldor that followed after Feanor could escape from the shadow that lay upon his house. And it came to pass even as Thingol had spoken, for the Sindar heard his word, and thereafter throughout Beleri, and they refused the tongue of the Noldor and shunned those who spoke it aloud. But the exiles took the Sindarin tongue in all their daily uses, and the high speech of the West was spoken only by the lords of the Noldor among themselves. Yet that speech lived ever as a language of lore, wherever any of that people dwelt. It came to pass that Nargothrond was full wrought, and yet Turgon still dwelt in the halls of Vinyamar. The sons of Finarfin were gathered there to a feast, and Galadriel came from Doriath, and dwelt a while in Nargothrond. Now King Finrond Felagund had no wife, and Galadriel asked him why this should be. But foresight came upon Felagund as she spoke, and he said, An oath I too shall swear, and must be free to fulfill it, and go into darkness. Nor shall anything of my realm endure, and that a son should inherit. But it is said that not until that hour had such cold thoughts ruled him. For indeed, she whom he had loved was Amari of the Venar, and she went not with him into exile. Interesting. All right, and let's see, go to 168. Supposedly, as it picks up, people have said, hey, it gets to be a real page turner. So now we're at page 168. All right. It is said that in all these matters, none save Finrod Felagund took counsel with King Thingol, and he was ill pleased, both for that reason and because he was troubled by dreams concerning the coming of men, ere ever the first tidings of them were heard. Therefore he commanded that men should take no lands to dwell in, save in the north, and that the princes whom they served should be answerable for all that they did. And he said, Into Doriath shall no man come, while my realm lasts, and not even those of the house of Beor, who serve Finrod the beloved. Melian said nothing to him at the time, but afterwards she said to Galadriel, Now the world runs on swiftly to great tidings, and one of men, even of Beor's house, shall indeed come, and the girdle of Melian shall not restrain him, for doom greater than my power shall send him. And the songs that shall spring from that coming shall endure when all Middle-earth is changed. Just get a little bit of a beverage here. Cheers, Dead Gamer, and cheers if you've stayed with us this long. I definitely got to rest up for tomorrow. But yeah, I just had a long vacation, and there were some things I wanted to catch up on. So we are reading from J.R.R. Tolkien's The Silmarillion, published after his death by Christopher Tolkien, his son, who's also passed on. And we're just looking at references to Galadriel in preparation for our next rant cast for the Lord of the Rings Rings of Power Amazon series. So we read page 168. Okay, we're just going forward to 199. This is in chapter 18 on the ruin of Beleriand and the fall of Fingolfin. This is all treated as if it's real history for Lord of the Rings. Ah, the Lay of Luthien. I remember this. Luthien, Luthien and Beren. Remember this. This is famous. Okay, so let's see. Where is Galadriel in this? Yep, okay. Thus Beren came before King Finrod Felagund, and Felagund knew him, needing no ring to remind him of the kin of Beor and of Barahin. Behind closed doors they sat, and Beren told of the death of Barahir, and of all that had befallen him in Doriath, and he wept, recalling Luthien and their joy together. Just gonna pause. So on J.R.R. Tolkien's tombstone, he put Beren next to his name and Luthien next to his wife's name. So, yeah, he wrote this romantic story of an elf and a human who fell in love. So anyway, and he wept, recalling Luthien and the joy together. But Felagund heard his tale in wonder and disquiet, and he knew that the oath he had sworn was come upon him for his death, as long before he had foretold to Galadriel. He spoke then to Beren in heaviness of heart. It is plain that Thingol desires your death, but it seems that this doom goes beyond his purpose, and that the oath of Feanor is again at work. So the Silmarils are cursed with an oath of hatred, and he that even names them in desire moves a great power from slumber. And then the sons of Feanor would lay all the elf kingdoms in ruin, rather than suffer any other than themselves to win or possess a Silmaril, for the oath drives them. And now Celegorm and Curufin are dwelling in my halls, and though I, Finarfin's son, am king, they have won a strong power in the realm, and led many of their own people. They have shown friendship to me in every need, but I fear they will show neither love nor mercy to you, if your quest be told. Yet my own oath holds, and thus we are all ensnared. Then King of Felagund spoke before his people, recalling the deeds of Barahir and his vow. He declared that it was laid upon him to aid the son of Barahir in his need. He sought the help of his chieftains. Then Celegorm arose amid the throng, and drawing his sword he cried, Be he friend or foe, whether demon of Morgoth or elf or child of men, or any other living thing in Arda, neither law, nor love, nor league of hell, nor might of the Valar, nor any power of wizardry, shall defend him from the pursuing hate of Feanor's sons, if he take or find a Silmaril and keep it. But the Silmarils we alone claim until the world ends. Wow, so they were really after those Silmarils, these jewels. All right, let's move on. There's a lot of references to Sauron at a certain point. So Lethian and Luthien are different, of course. But yeah, you start to get confused, like all these different names. I had the same problem reading Le Morte Arthur about King Arthur. Like, you have all these different kings and princes and just different characters, and some of them have similar looking names, especially if they're like related to one another. And it's almost like you need a chart to keep them all straight. Of course, sometimes if a character is only mentioned like once, it's like, why do you need to know? Just giving the illusion of depth to a history. Okay, 282 on the ruin of Doriath. Okay, Let's see. At that time, Beren and Luthien yet dwelt in Tall Gallen, the Green Isle, and the river Adirant, southernmost of the streams that, falling from Ered Linden, flowed down to join with Galayan, and their son Dior Aluchil had to wife Nimloth, kinswoman of Celeborn, prince of Doriath, who was wedded to the lady Galadriel. Ta-da! The sons of Dior and Nimloth were Alured and Alurin, and a daughter also was born to them, and she was named Elwing, which is star spray, for she was born on a night of stars, whose light glittered in the spray of the waterfall of Lanthyr Lemoth, beside her father's house. Now word went swiftly among the elves of Osiriand that a great host of dwarves bearing gear of war had come down out of the mountains and passed over Gelion at the Ford of Stones. These tidings came soon to Beren and Luthien, and in that time also a messenger came to them out of Doriath, telling of what had befallen there. Then Beren arose and left Tall Gallen, and summoning to him Dior his son, they went north to the river Askar, and with them went many of the green elves of Osiriand. All right, let me check the next reference here. 306, so it's a while before we hear from her again. Akalabath, the downfall of Numenor. Ooh. It's 306. So it's right before that. So it's on the voyage of Erandil. Erendil. Chapter 24. Okay, right at the end. Yet not all the Eldali were willing to forsake the hither lands, where they had long suffered and long dwelt, and some lingered many an age in Middle-earth. Among those were Círdan the shipwright, and Celeborn of Doriath, with Galadriel his wife, who alone remained of those who led the Noldor to exile in Beleriand. In Middle-earth dwelt also Gil-galad the High King. With him was Elrond half-elven, who chose, as was granted to him, to be numbered among the Eldar. But Elros, his brother, chose to abide with men. And from these brethren alone has come among men the blood of the firstborn, and strain of the spirits divine that were before Arda. For they were the sons of Elwing, Dior's daughter, Luthien's son, child of Thingol and Melian. And Erandil, his father, was the son of Ildril, Celebrindal, Turgon's daughter of Gondolin. But Morgoth himself, the Valar thrust through the door of night, beyond the walls of the world into the timeless void. And a guard is set forever on those walls, and Erandil keeps watch upon the ramparts of the sky. Yet the lies that Melkor, the mighty and accursed, Morgoth, Boglir, the power of terror and of hate, sowed in the hearts of the elves and men, are a seed that does not die. It cannot be destroyed. And ever and anon it sprouts anew, and will bear dark fruit even unto the latest days. Here ends the Silmarillion. It has passed from the high and the beautiful to darkness and ruin. That was of old of the fate of Arda Marid. And if any change shall come, and the marring be amended, Manwë and Varda may know. But they have not revealed it, and it is not declared in the dooms of Mandos. So it's like a history. And so Akallabeth is the next part, and that's the downfall of Numenor. Note on pronunciation. See, I should have read this first. Following note is intended simply to clarify a few main features in the pronunciation of names. The Elvish language is by no means exhaustive. For full information on the subject, see the Lord of the Rings Appendix E. So constant C always has the value of K, never of S. Thus, Celeborn is Celeborn, not Celeborn. Okay. Da, 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 da. G always has the sound in English G and get. Thus, region, erigin are not pronounced like English region. Region, Eregion. First syllable of Ginlith is in English begin, not as in gin. Okay. Okay. Index of names. Explain everything. Certain words you can see he definitely chose them because they have a nice sound to them. See, I'm just going to look at. Okay, so what does it say about Gladriel in the index? Daughter of Finarfin and sister of Finrod Felagund, one of the leaders of the Naldarin rebellion against the Valar. Wedded Celeborn of Doriath and with him remained in Middle-earth after the end of the First Age. Keeper of Nenya, the Ring of Water, and Lothlorien. Okay. And let me just check again. I should know this, but who are the Valar? Who or what? Those with power, the powers, singular Vala. Named given to those great Ainur who entered into Ea at the beginning of time and assumed the function of guarding and governing Arda. Called also the Great Ones, the rulers of Arda, the Lords of the West, the Lords of Valinor. Passim. So who are the Ainur? See, I can see how at some point you'd give this to a fan and be like, here, knock yourself out. Just go down the rabbit holes of Tolkien's imagination. Tolkien or Tolkien, not Token. Ainur. Now, if I read this whole thing cover to cover and remembered it, again, I think a lot of this, I mean, there's some dialogue in there, but it's mostly just this happened, this person's related to this person. Whereas you're reading The Lord of the Rings and there's all this description of the food. Hey, Jacer. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see you there. Had my nose in the book. It's a good read. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the reviews, I guess a lot of people start reading the Silmarillion and they say, oh man, it's so boring, it's so long, it's so dry, and they give up. But other people saying, well, after you get through the first 80 pages or so, then it starts to pick up and be interesting. And if you already have a love of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, as long as you're not expecting the same level of storytelling, if you just want to like learn more about the world and the history, then it's great. So I figured, okay, fine, I'll get my own copy. But I did get like the cheapest copy I could find. I got this like paperback because they're coming out with a new version this year that's going to be like a big like hardcover illustrated. I think I would only get that if I really, really thought this was awesome. This is more just like I just want to learn more about the lore. But it's interesting that this was written specifically to be the lore rather than, you know, like somebody took all the Star Wars books and like put summaries into a dictionary or something, encyclopedia. Okay. Okay, some of these words that came up a lot, Aman. So Aman means blessed, free from evil, the name of the land in the west beyond the great sea in which the Valar dwelt after they had left the Isle of Almarin, often referred to as the Blessed Realm. Passim. But what were the Ainur? Now, any like lore nerds who are watching this are just like, duh, everybody knows that. But a lot of this stuff maybe I've heard it, but I have no idea what it's supposed to actually be. Aianur. Is it not in here? I would assume it was explained. I just want to figure out what these characters are supposed to be. Ainur. Aianur. Oh, okay, here we go. The Holy Ones, singular Aianur, the first beings created by Iluvatar, the Order of the Valar and the Maiar made before. Okay, so I'm assuming... Okay, before I assume, I'm going to look. I'm guessing that Iluvatar is supposed to be like God in this world, and the Ainur are like angels, or equivalent, you know, in this mythology that he's creating. So Iluvatar. So I think pretty much everybody knows that J.R.R. Tolkien was a Christian, and he, I mean, he wasn't trying to create allegory with this, but at the same time, I mean, his faith and his, I mean, history and stories that he'd read and everything informed his creation of this fictional world. So it's not like 100% the same, of course, but I mean, it's definitely like inspired. Iluvatar, father of all, Eru. Oh, and there's a whole history of Iluvatar as well. Yeah, because the question is like, is Middle Earth Earth, or is it just like an alternate Earth? Because there's some things in like The Hobbit that are clearly in our world, like tobacco and I don't know, various like ordinary things. They have the same stuff as we have. They have Christmas. But I mean, is it really Christmas, or we're just calling it that to translate it to what it the closest equivalent in our language? Because they don't have English, they're speaking some other language. Oh yeah, and what were the Maya? Because I want to say in Maya, I keep hearing that that's what Gandalf was. Yeah, let's look up Gandalf. Because Gandalf is... Where was he this whole time? And you say, oh, the Wandering Wizard. Old fool. Old fool. Gandalf, the name of men, among men of Mithrandir. Oh yeah, they always call him Mithrandir. One of the Ishtari, or Istari, wizards. See Olorin. Okay, so he isn't a Maya, he's an Istari. Olorin? See, it's just like a rabbit trail. Olorin, what's that? Olorin, a Maya, one of the Istari wizards. See Mithrandir, Gandalf, 2 towers. Olorin, I was in my youth in the West that is forgotten. Okay, so what are the Maya? I mean, they say Tolkien, you know, he was. It's like he created this stuff, and it almost sounds like it's a real like legend, real mythology. But he just made it up. But I mean, he was drawing upon lots of European folklore and history and stuff that sounded cool, all kind of mixed together. Kind of like a lot of other good fiction, you know, everything's a remix of everything else. Star Wars, Dune. Okay, Maiar. Ainur of lesser degree than the Valar. So I guess lesser angels, so to speak. And who is Morgoth? Because I kept hearing that name. I assume it's one of the bad guys, but who is he really? Oh, here we go. As I'm going around, I'm finding stuff. Narsil, the sword of Elendil, made by Telkar of Nogrod, that was broken when Elendil died in combat with Sauron. Before the shards of it, before the shards, it was reforged for Aragorn and named Anduril. Okay, but we are looking for something else. Morgoth. The Black Enemy. Ooh. Name of Melkor. Oh, so he is the bat. He's like the devil figure, I suppose. Name of Melkor, first given to him by Feanor after the rape of the Silmarils. Okay, so I think they're using rape in the old term of like theft, like you take something by force. Sorry if I scared anybody with that, but because the Silmarils are jewels. Actually, let's look up Silmarils. Oh, before we get into that, Saruman, man of skill, the name among men of Kurinur, which it translates one of the Istari wizards. So even though man refers to humanity, they still refer to these wizards as if they're human. Because in the movies, it's kind of like sometimes they talk about Gandalf as if he's an old man, and sometimes they just call him something else. Sauron. Okay, who is Sauron? The Abhorred, or Sauron. The Abhorred, in Sindarin called Gorthaur, greatest of the servants of Melkor, and his origin a Maya of Elul. Okay, so he's like a wizard too. Like a lesser angel, lesser fallen angel. So Morgoth and Melkar are the evil being in this story. So Silmarils. The three jewels made by Feanor before the destruction of the two trees of Valinor, and filled with their light. See especially blah blah blah. A whole bunch of references. Oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of elves. There's Sylvan elves, which are woodland elves. There's Sindar, which are gray elves. I saw a reference in here to dark elves. Now it shouldn't be confused with Warhammer or night elves from Warcraft. I mean, there's so many other like fictions that kind of like put their own spin on this stuff. But let's see. A lot of flipping between pages. So Doriath is the land of the fence, referring to the girdle of Melian, earlier called Elgador, the kingdom of Thingol, and Melian in the forests of Neldareth and Regien, ruled from Menegroth on the river Esgalduin. Now there was an edition I saw in the bookstore next to this that actually had a map that somebody had made of all the lands and everything. I'm not sure if it's actually Tolkien or just like a fan-made thing, but it was kind of cool. Let's see. The Dark Lord. Term is used for Morgoth and of Sauron. Sauron. Dark Elves. Okay, here we go. In the language of Aman, all elves that did not cross the Great Sea were Dark Elves. Mori Quendi. And the term is sometimes used thus. When Caranthir called Thingol a Dark Elf, it was intended opprobriously. It was especially so since Thingol had been to Aman and was not accounted among the Morquendi. But in the period of the exile of the Noldor, it is often used of the elves of Middle-earth, other than the Noldor and the Sindar. It is then virtually equivalent to Avari. Different, again, is the title Dark Elf of the Sindarin elf Eol. But at 159 to 160, Turgon no doubt meant that Eol was of the Morquendi. Okay. So Durin, we always hear about Durin's folk. So Durin is Lord of the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm, Moria. We talk about Durin's Bane and all that sort of thing. You could just like sink into this. I think my favorite might be the tale of Turin Turambar, says Jacer. Yeah, yeah. So some of this stuff, I mean, you hear it enough times and you hear fans talking about it and it's just like seeing it in print. It's like, "Oh, of course. Yeah, it does make sense." And a lot more stuff you hear. Because again, it's Tolkien trying to create that illusion of there's this deep history and everything's kind of like, it's like the Bible. It's like people have these genealogies and it's like they can go back thousands of years, like all these generations of people and these great kings and oh, but then there was this one guy who was a traitor and this thing happened in this migration and it's like all his layers, so it makes the world seem very rich and old and deep, even though he's just making it up. So it's really cool. But obviously, he's imitating the style of those kinds of tales and stories and speech. Beren, here he is, Beren, son of Barahir, cut a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown to be the bride price of Luthien Thingol's daughter. So Thingol is Luthien's father, and was slain, spoilers, by Carcharoth, the wolf of Angband, but returning from the dead, alone of mortal men, lived afterwards with Luthien and Tal Gallen and Osirian, and fought with the dwarves at Sarn Athrad. Great-grandfather of Elrond and Elros, an ancestor of the Númenórean kings, also called Camlost, Erchamion, and One Hand. Oh, so interesting. So Beren is the great-grandfather of Elrond, and they kept calling him Elrond half-elven. I'm like, half-elven? So in the movie version, yeah, an anthology of history. So in the movie version, Hugo Weaving does a great job portraying Elrond, but he makes such a big deal about, like, don't marry a human, to his daughter. Don't marry a man because he's going to die. You're going to keep on living because you're an elf, and it's going to be so sad. But it's like he himself is the child or the great-grandchild of a human and an elf. So to the elves that are not, like, it sounds like they choose either to be human or to be elf. But if they're elf, they just live for centuries or millennia, unless they get killed, of course. But humans don't live that long. But then you also have humans like the Dunedain who have like really long lifespans. Again, assuming they don't get killed. Like presumably just naturally long life. But then you also have other characters that have magically extended lives, like Gollum. He lived for centuries, even though he's just a little guy, like a hobbit. Balrog, or Balrog, demon of might, Sindarin form, of the name of the demons of fire that served Morgoth. So those nasty creatures. Okay, let's look up that character that you mentioned. So this is an endless rabbit hole. The Tale of Turin, Turambar, if he's in here. Or she, I guess I shouldn't assume, I don't know. Oh, Eldar. See, because the Eldar are mentioned in Warhammer 40k and Space Crusade. Obviously, they got it from here. Eldar, like elders. According to Elvish legend, the name Eldar, people of the stars, was given to all the elves by the Vala Arome. It came, however, to be used to refer only to the elves of the three kindreds, Vanyar, Noldar, and Teleri, who set out on the great westward march from Cuevianen, whether or not they remained in Middle-earth, and to exclude the Elvari. The elves of Oman and all elves who ever dwelt in Oman were called the High Elves, Teradar, and the elves of the light, Calaquendi, see dark elves, Umanyar, Passim. See also elves. So the Elder Days refers to the first age, called the Eldest Days. So there's the three ages. Elendili, elf friends. I remember those. Name given to those Númenóreans who are not estranged from the Eldar in the days of Tar and Kaliman, and later kings, also called the Faithful. So Dune also had an appendix at the end with like history and little stuff. So again, you've got these authors that are trying to world build. Instead of having these big long narrations, as you know, we live on a planet where all this stuff happened. You know, a scene where a kid's in school and it's like, let me tell you the history of all this stuff. You just have it in the appendix. It's like, by the way, if you want to know more, here's where it comes from. All right, so I'm starting to get tired here. Let's let's wake up a little bit. Find this reference that Jacer is mentioning. Yeah, because maybe you guys have read all this. I haven't. I mean, this is new for me. I'm still rereading because I read through the Lord of the Rings a long time ago. I'm doing my second read through, and same with The Hobbit. Of course, I barely got into The Hobbit. I mean, that'll probably go quick after I read more. So Turin, son of Hurin, and Morwen, chief subject of the lay named Narn Ihin Hurin, from which chapter 21 was derived. For his other names, see Nethan, Gorthal, Agarwayan, Moragil, Wild Man of the Woods, and Turumbar. Interesting. 21. I don't know, you want me to read it? It's not too long. Probably do it. Let's see, 21 of Turin Turumbar. It's page 236 in the Del Rey edition. Yeah, I don't know if I can. Yeah, this is kind of long for the stream. It's like 35 pages. But if you recommend it, I'll definitely read it on my own. Check it out. All right, guys. Well, let's see. What else can we find of maybe Sauron? Because he's obviously a big character. Oh yeah, so J.R.R. Tolkien, John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, was born on January 3rd, 1892, in Bloemfontein, South Africa. After serving in World War I, he embarked upon a distinguished academic career and was recognized as one of the finest philologists in the world. He was a professor of Anglo-Saxon at Oxford. He always said, oh, English history, but it's Anglo-Saxon. A fellow of Pembroke College and a fellow of Merton College, until his retirement in 1959. That would have been about the time that he wrote The Lord of the Rings, 50s. He wrote The Hobbit in the 30s. He is, however, beloved throughout the world as the creator of Middle-earth. Because I always used to wonder, like, well, what about the other two other Earths? And this was one in the middle, but no, it's like the Mediterranean. It's Middle-earth, the continent. And the author of such classic works as The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. He died on September 2nd, 1973, at the age of 81. But yeah, some people are saying, oh, he's going to be spinning in his grave if he knew about Lord of the Rings of Power. Oh, it does have a picture of the map. So here's... the camera's frozen again. Let me unfreeze it. I'll have to figure out what's going on, but there's the map. You can kind of see it. It's obviously nowhere near as fancy as the one that was in the illustrated guide. Beleriand. Yeah, this is a big rabbit hole. You could spend, I mean, I could picture like kids just like spending all day just like reading this. Like, wow. Just imagining all the stuff in Middle-earth. But again, it was not intended for publication. Maybe someday, but at the time it was just a bunch of notes. Well, and he probably worked through something. I mean, you think about like if you're, let's say it was your dad and your dad had written all these stories, his life's work, and then he passed away and he took his notes and tried to publish like a guide to the stories that he'd written. Work through your grief, because not every child of every like famous person is like close to their. I'm not sure if Christopher Tolkien was close to his father or not. Maybe, but I want to say like Brian Herbert, for like Frank Herbert's son, from what I've heard, from what I've read, is that he wasn't close to his dad, or he resented that his dad spent so much time writing the book. And so some people were like, oh, he's going to get his anger out in these stories. But of course, he wasn't like a super great writer on his own, I guess. So he got Kevin J. Anderson to help him. But that's Dune. And it's a different thing. Whereas all he is doing here is he's editing his father's work. He's not writing his own stuff. Interesting. The Balrog in Moria is Durin's Bane. Ah, yeah. You're right. I remember that now. Because as far as I understand, the Peter Jackson movies were pretty faithful adaptation. I mean, there's some things they changed. Like all the references to tobacco, they basically like subtly implied it was meant to be marijuana, even though it was clearly tobacco. Which I'm sure they did for cultural reasons. I mean, smoking is considered passé. I mean, unless it's vaping. I think even that's becoming passé. But, and they made, was it Glorfindel? Was a male elf. But they kind of like got rid of, I think they erased him from the story, and they just basically gave all of his stuff to Arwen. And what else? I think Éowyn was more attracted to Aragorn than she was in the book. And Aragorn was a little more of a reluctant king in the movie version, whereas in the book he'd already had that story arc, so he was gung-ho like about becoming the king, ready to go. And they reforged the sword a lot sooner. Like it was reforged like really quickly. And there was more time took place. So like they hung out, they had more meals, they sang more songs. Whereas the movie was just like action, cut. Here they go. And I guess Pippin and Merry had more character development in the movie, and so did Legolas. Like Legolas was very mysterious. He kind of makes me think of Natty Bumppo in Last of the Mohicans. Although that was a developed character, but yeah, Legolas. He just kind of like, yeah, I'm awesome. So Peter Jackson did certain things, and I guess he wanted to do more stuff, but he kind of pulled back at the last part. So like at the end, a lot of people know this, but like in the movie version, so Aragorn is fighting this troll all by himself, and he's just getting his butt kicked, and he's just like barely hanging on. But originally it was going to be he was fighting Sauron himself. And that definitely did not happen in the book. So they changed it to a troll, like CGI'd it to a troll, and that was probably, the fans appreciated that. But it's interesting to see a lot of this stuff about that I remember from the game War in the North. So they must have done their research. A lot of the stuff that's in that game is not in the movie, even though they use the aesthetic of the movie. It's a lot of stuff from The Hobbit and stuff from here, too. Radagast, one of the Istari wizards. Quenta Silmarillion, this history of the Silmarils. Yeah, Durin's Bane. The Balrog. Yeah, I like the way it's handled in the movie. It's like they dug down too deeply in the mines. They found a demon of the ancient world. You can find a rough cut of the Sauron-Aragorn fight online. It was interesting. Yeah, I've seen that. The storyboards and everything. Yeah, the making of The Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson, is pretty awesome. But see, that's the thing. It's like, for me, my history with this fiction is when I was growing up, so The Hobbit cartoon was on TV, and I loved it. I rewatched it so many times. There was like a storybook based on it. There was like a picture book. for kids. There was like a slideshow with the audio over and over. Just watch that on VHS, and then of course finally later when it came out on DVD. The book, I think my brother and I, our father read it to us, and I just sat there and listened to like some of it, but I didn't listen to the whole thing. So I remember the riddles in the dark, where Gollum is doing the riddles with Bilbo, and he gets the ring. But yeah, the world of Middle Earth, I just kind of heard about it, and then I saw the theatrical movie, the Ralph Bakshi one that everybody hates and bashes, because I mean, they ran out of money. They only got to the end of the middle of the Two Towers, and they never finished it. And it was really gory for a kids movie. And a lot of it was just like black and white footage that they like painted over. So you saw like there's an army from like Alexander Nevsky, but they painted like fangs on everybody and given them red eyes to make it look like orcs. It's kind of cheap looking. When the animation is done, it looks really good, but there's a lot of scenes where it's like looks like it's unfinished. So it obviously went over budget, and I guess Bakshi, I want to say he had a nervous breakdown and just was like, I'm never going to finish this, and I wish I hadn't done it, or something like that. You know, it's just like, because people ask him, well, would you ever go back and finish it? He's like, no. Like, hell no, kind of thing. But still, it left an impression on me. And I'm thinking, like, the year it came out, like, I would have been, like, 1 year old. So there's no way I could have seen it as a baby. So movies were in theaters a lot longer back then. So I probably saw it years later, because I remember it. And I remember describing it like it was like a live action and cartoon together. So Jacer says, I think he writes of the first Third Age, ancient pre-Bible, fourth Bible, around the 5th and modern era, the 6th. Yeah, I sort of get that idea, that it sort of plays out as if he's talking about like mythical history. And like as it gets closer and closer to the time of the main story, like it's more detailed. You get like dialogue and stuff. But yeah, it has that epic feel of like the realm of myth into legend, into history, into the present. And so it's weird because in the story you've got wizards and you've got elves who are like thousands of years old. Ages, yeah. And they're so old that in theory they could remember some of this stuff. So it's like somebody going, oh yeah, I remember the plagues of Egypt. Yep, let me tell you all about it. It's like, what? Like, I remember the Great Flood, huh? You know, like, let's write some of this down. Like, tell me more. On the other hand, do they have perfect memories? Or is it just like really like it's so long ago they barely remember it? Because the elves, I mean, they appear to be like young still. Of course, now Gandalf, he looks like an old man. But I mean, was he always that way? Or is there like a young Gandalf? Or was he born with a big beard? I mean, what is he? Did he ever look different than that? Does he have a bad memory? I mean, that's another difference people pointed out. They pointed out that in The Hobbit, Gandalf is kind of like, sometimes he's a kind of a comical, like bumbling old man. Like, kind of forgets stuff, and he's kind of like, you know, he's fallible. He's kind of goofy sometimes. But in The Lord of the Rings, he's like really formal and really regal and stately and, you know, wise. And so people were saying, again, I have to reread it to kind of get that flavor, but people were saying, well, in the Peter Jackson stories, he kind of combined them. So sometimes Gandalf is like super wise and stately, and other times he's kind of goofy and bumbling and, you know, doddering old guy, goofing up. So it's like it goes back and forth, and then that way it like maintains continuity with the Hobbit, because then in the Hobbit he can portray him the same way. He doesn't have to be like all of a sudden he got serious and it's just, you know, he's like Yoda. He's just pretending to be a crazy old man when really he was the whole time he was like serious and, you know, just testing Luke, just testing Bilbo, just testing Frodo. So I don't know, but I think it kind of makes it interesting. It's just like, hey, he's so old that, you know, the fact that he's still got it together after all this time, is miraculous. But most of the time he can get stuff done, but sometimes, he has limitations. He's not all powerful. You know. There's so many good quotable lines in the cartoon. And I know the cartoon version plays up some different things. So in the cartoon version of The Hobbit, the whole thing with the Arkenstone is completely gone. It's completely deleted. So like when I was watching the Peter Jackson one, I'm like, the Arkenstone, what the heck is that? And I went back and I listened to the audiobook of The Hobbit, and it was like the Arkenstone is mentioned like right at the end. It's like it's not there the whole time. So the fact that the movie versions, as flawed as they are, of The Hobbit, which it really should have only been one movie, they mention the Arkenstone right at the start, so you'll be thinking about it the whole time. Whereas in the book, it's just kind of like, oh, by the way, there was an Arkenstone, and by the way, like, you know, Bilbo knew where it was, and everybody's like, where is it? And like, oh, I'm not going to tell you. Like, what? Huh? Just kind of dropped it in there. Valrani says, I got the impression from the movies Gandalf the Grey was goofy and fun, and when he became Gandalf the White, he was more wise. Yeah, you can say that. He has a couple comical moments though in the movie as Gandalf the White. Not as many, but yeah. It's like I liked him more before he died. Yeah. And the other thing was Saruman is Saruman of many colors. He's Saruman the White, yeah, because you think, oh, he's a higher level wizard than Gandalf. But in the cartoon version, in the Ralph Bakshi movie, he wears red the whole time, so he looks like Zargon. He's got a white beard. Radagast and the two blue wizards could still be alive. Yes. Yeah, because I guess ultimately in the lore, from what I understand, all the people that go. So the elves were leaving Middle Earth to go to the Grey Havens, to the Undying Lands, and this was talked about in the Rantcast, so it got me thinking about it again. All the people that had rings went there too. So Elrond, Gandalf, because he had one of the rings of power. Galadriel, she had one of the rings of power. Frodo, Sam, because he carried the ring for a little while. But yeah, there are these two blue wizards that never get mentioned in the movie. They're just they're off doing other stuff. But yeah, the dwarves are off fighting their battles. The wizards are doing other stuff. Those would have been some cool stories to see. See? And what about the Easterlings and the men of the south, the north? There's all these humans that Sauron like conquered and enslaved. It's like what happened to them before the story? Like with this Rings of Power thing, they could have covered that history and not. I mean, it still would have had the feel of Middle Earth without necessarily like trampling on the history. I don't know. Let's see if the blue wizards are in here. Yeah, Radagast was the brown wizard, and he was played by what's the actor's name? He was one of the Doctor Who actors, but they portrayed him as a complete goofball in the Hobbit movies. But they kind of do that. I mean, the Hobbit is much more comical. Like the dwarves are kind of bumbling, but it's weird. It's like they made Thorin like he's just a miniature Aragorn, whereas the other dwarves are more like what you would expect them to be, like maybe like the cartoon. I mean, I don't know. Some of the fantasy characters, they're like caricatures of humans in a way. Druid, hermit, yeah, the blue wizards. Because yeah, they seem to be like almost ageless. So the Istari are the wizards. Blue, blue, blue. Boromir is in here. Great-grandson of Beor the Old, grandfather of Barahir, father of Beren, first lord of Ladros. Blue. There's the Blue Mountains. Yeah, they don't mention the Blue Wizards. Not in the Silmarillion. Unless they're under something else. Celeborn, Tree of Silver. Name of the Tree of Tal Eressa, a scion of Galathion. Oh, Celeborn 2. Elf of Doriath, kinsman of Thingol, wedded Galadriel, and with her remained in Middle-earth after the end of the First Age. Yeah, it's getting late. Aragorn, the 39th heir of Isildur, in the direct line, king of the reunited realms of Arnor and Gondor, after the War of the Ring, wedded Arwen, daughter of Elrond, called the heir of Isildur. See, obviously some of these characters are from the Lord of the Rings you've heard of. Some of these words, it's obvious he chose them just because they roll off the tongue. They sound good. Adanadil, Elfman, name given to Turin in Nergothrond. So there's Turin again. Well, I think I'm getting kind of towards the end of my attention here, but this is really interesting. Just kind of a first dive into the Silmarillion, treating it as a reference book, just kind of looking for things that stand out. But definitely there's a history here, and again, not something that fans back in the 50s would have been reading about, just imagining or wondering about. And I guess a lot of stuff, people would just send letters to Tolkien after he became famous and just be like, what is, how tall is Aragorn? 6'2", or, he'd just have to come up with answers to questions. And so you could like piece together stuff, kind of like people endlessly asking George Lucas, well, what about this? What about that? What happened this? And he would just make it up on the spot. But I wouldn't be surprised if like Tolkien had, pages and pages of stuff written. Or if he didn't, he'd be like, I'll be right back. And he's like, writes a bunch of stuff. There's the history. So the Deathless Lands are also called the Undying Lands. Denethor, son of Lenwë, leader of the Nandoran elves that came at last over the Blue Mountains and dwelt in Osiriand, slain on Aman-Areb in the first battle of Beleriand. I thought Denethor was the steward of Gondor. I guess that was a different character. Of course, I guess, they have the same names. Dragons. There's a whole bunch of references to dragons, of course. Durin, we already talked about him. Easterlings, also called swarthy men, entered Beleriand from the east in the time after the Dagor Bragollach, and fought on both sides in the Nirnaeth Arnodiad, given Hithlum as a dwelling place by Morgoth, where they oppressed the remnant of the people of Hador. There's the Easterlings. Were there Southlings too, or am I just imagining that? Isildur, elder son of Elendil, who with his father and his brother Anarion escaped from the drowning of Numenor. Oh yeah, because Numenor was like Atlantis. It sunk into the ocean. And founded in Middle-earth the Numenorian realms in exile. Lord of Minas Ithil cut the ruling ring from Sauron's hand, slain by orcs in the Anduin when the ring slipped from his finger. Isildur. Isengard, translation, to represent the language of Rohan, of the Elvish name Angrenost. Imladris. Oh, Imladris is Rivendell, literally deep dale of the cleft. Elrond's dwelling in the valley of the Misty Mountains. Yep. Glamrung the Dragon. Glamrung, okay. You're telling me stuff to look up. Glamrung. Yeah, he's not in the index anyway. Oh, well, actually, Glaurung, Glaurung, the first of the dragons of Morgoth, called the Father of Dragons, in the Dagor, Bragollach, and Niranth Arnodiad, and the sack of Nagrathond, cast a spell upon Turin and upon Ninor, slain by Turin, spoilers, at Cabot and Aras, called also the Great Worm and the Worm of Morgoth. Okay, there you go. I guess I don't feel as bad about mispronouncing this stuff either, because it's completely made up. It's not like somebody's going like, hey, how dare you say my name wrong? It's like, yeah. Gothmog, Lord of Balrogs, High Captain of Angband, Slayer of Feanor, Fingon, and Ecethlian. The same name was born in the Third Age by the lieutenant of Minas Morgul, Return of the King. So some of the names get reused. Glorfindel, elf of Gondolin, who fell to his death, spoilers, in Cirith Thorenath in combat with a Balrog after the escape from the sack of the city. The name means golden-haired. Glorfindel. Wait a minute. I thought I was reading something people were saying, well, Glorfindel's still alive. He never died. But this is saying that he died, unless it's a different one. Spelling might be off. Yeah. And I hear that, I don't know about the Silmarillion, because this is a long time later, but with the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, apparently like the editor like kept correcting Tolkien's spelling, and he's like, no, I meant to spell it that way. Dwarves, not dwarfs. You know, stuff like that. So, but I mean, eventually people realize, okay, he's writing his own thing, so just leave it. Wasn't there eagles? Amon Amarth, Mount Doom, the name given to Aradruin when its fires awoke again after Sauron's return from Numenor. I wonder what they say about orcs in here. Because the orc history is really complicated. It kept changing. Mirkwood, Misty Mountains. Mordor, the Black Land, also called the Land of Shadow, Sauron's realm east of the mountains of the Ethel Duath. Moria, the Black Chasm, later name for Khazad-dûm. Hadrond. Nandor, said to mean those who turned back. The Nandor were those elves from the host of the Teleri who refused to cross the Misty Mountains on the westward journey from Cuievén, but of whom a part, led by Denethor, came long afterwards over the Blue Mountains and dwelt in Osiriand, the Green Elves. Okay. See, it's just like if you're reading through the dictionary looking for one word, you find like a million other things that you read. Orcs, creatures of Morgoth. That's all they say. For their origin, 47-103. Okay, let's find the origin of the orcs. At least according to this. 47 and 103. Let's see. according to the Silmarillion. You guys ready for this? Okay, but of those unhappy ones who are ensnared by Melkor, little is known of a certainty. For who of the living has descended into the pits of Autumno, or has explored the darkness of the councils of Melkor? Yet this is held true by the wise of Aresi, that all of those of the Quendi who came into the hands of Melkor, okay, so those were the Dark Elves, I think, ere Autumno was broken, were put there in prison by slow arts of cruelty, were corrupted and enslaved. And thus did Melkor breed the hideous race of the orcs, in envy and mockery of the elves, of whom they were afterwards the bitterest foes. For the orcs had life and multiplied after the manner of the children of Iluvatar, and naught that had life of its own, nor the semblance of life, could ever Melkor make, since his rebellion in the Ainlundale before the beginning, so say the wise. And deep in their dark hearts the orcs loathed the master whom they served in fear, the maker only of their misery. This, it may be, was the vilest deed of Melkor, and the most hateful to Iluvatar. So he corrupted the elves. So that speech that Saruman gives in the movie version, it's like a shortened tale of this. Okay, so as there's more, let's see, for the orcs. Where are we? And brilliantly acted by Christopher Lee. Rest in peace. Yeah, several of the actors in the movie version have passed away. Ian Holm, who played Bilbo. Let's see, 103. And ere long the evil creatures came even to Beleriand, over passes in the mountains, or up from the south to the dark forest. Wolves were there, or creatures that walked in wolf shapes, and other fell beings of shadow, and among them were the orcs, who afterwards wrought ruin in Beleriand. But they were yet few and wary, and did but smell out the ways of the land, awaiting the return of their lord. Whence they came, or what they were, the elves knew not then, thinking them perhaps to be Avari, who had become evil and savage in the wild, and which they guessed all too near, it is said. Avari, I wonder what those are. See, it's like a scavenger hunt, if you don't know this stuff. Because, I mean, references to this stuff is sprinkled throughout The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but some of it is not in there at all, I don't think. Or it's really easy to miss. So if you ever published the history of Middle-earth, it would have been like, oh, okay. Avari, the unwilling, the refusers. The name given to all those elves who refused to join the westward march from Cuivienen. See, Eldar and Dark Elves. Okay, so they guessed that, oh, they were corrupted elves, and they were right. The original orcs were corrupted elves, according to this. Alright, anything else about orcs in here? Because I'm pretty sure the orcs are... There's a lot of stuff about orcs in the new series. Of course, I mean, it's not like everything is covered here. I mean, you could say plenty. It's like, oh yeah, they caused a lot of problems. Okay, well, here's some of them. This is just the origin of the orcs. Because really, this book is, let's see here. before you get to of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, because there's a whole section for that, in which these tales come to their end. Of old there was Sauron the Maya, whom the Sindel in Beleriand named Gorthaur. In the beginning of Arda, Melkor seduced him to his allegiance, and he became the greatest and most trusted of the servants of the enemy, and the most perilous, for he could assume many forms, and for long, if he willed, he could still appear noble and beautiful, so as to deceive all but the most wary. So that was page 341. But yeah, before you get to that, the Silmarillion, because it has that little passage where it says, and then this is the end of the Silmarillion. So before this, all this other stuff. Okay, so it's 306 pages. And then you've got another, so it's, novel length, paperback novel length. If you skip over all these like genealogies and things, there's another like 60 pages of stories after it ends. But again, this is all just notes compiled together. The Silmarillion. Second edition. Oh yeah, The Children of Húrin is another book. So there's Unfinished Tales, The Children of Húrin, History of Middle-earth, Book of Lost Tales, Part 1 and 2, The Lays of Beleriand, Shaping of Middle-earth, The Lost Road and Other Writings, Complete Guide to Middle-earth. I think that's a later book, fan book. Now, some other works of Tolkien's were published after his death. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, The Pearl, and Sir Orfeo. I actually own that. It's really good. Translations of some poems. And there's also there's a book about King Arthur. And there's some articles that he wrote about Beowulf and his translation of Beowulf. But yeah, there's his work that he did like outside of Lord of the Rings. It's less well known by those, the general public, and then of course the Lord of the Rings stuff. The Silmarillion is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents either are products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. Except for Gandalf, he's real. Just kidding. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff in here. But we'll have to read more of that later. I just wanted to kind of give myself a taste of this. I mean, I'm sure like you could spend a lifetime studying this. That was another thing, another red flag that I heard about this Rings of Power series is that they had some Tolkien scholar, whatever that means, an expert on Tolkien's writing on the staff, and supposedly they like fired this person or they just ignored what they said. It's like, wow, really? I don't know, that doesn't sound great. Because on the one hand, they want to assure fans, hey, it's okay. Like, we respect this great tradition. This is all, in the spirit of the stuff that you like. But then it's like they want to have it both ways. They also want to say, yeah, forget it. Who cares? His stuff is outdated. It's passé. It's old. Let's create something really cool and new. And when the trailers came out, people were just spamming it. Like, they kept posting this paraphrase about like how evil can't create anything new. It can only corrupt what's already been made or something. It was just like, wow, dang. But that was when the trailers were coming out. Now that the show is actually out, there's 3 episodes, and I guess they're going to release a new episode every week. In the season, I mean, every episode's like an hour long, and there's like 8 episodes for a season. But supposedly they're going to have like 5 seasons or something. I mean, whatever $1 billion gets you, but I don't know. I guess we'll see. Because I was saying, like, I mean, in that stuff we read, we didn't really get much about Galadriel. I think most of Galadriel's character development is in The Lord of the Rings itself. But what was she like? I mean, she refused to take the oath. She met her husband. She stayed with him when everybody else was leaving. But is there more said in this book that would tell us about her character? Otherwise, there's just a lot of stuff you could just fill in. I mean, somebody who's more of an expert on this than I am could say. But really, a lot of people. I mean, there's a whole generation of fans who knew these books, but then there's another generation of fans who are like me who just had a passing familiarity with it, but mostly it's the movies and the cartoons and the other popular stuff. I mean, if you ask the average person, they probably have a hard time figuring out which orcs are you talking about. The Tolkien orcs, the Warcraft orcs, the D&D orcs, whatever else. She led an army. Well, that's the thing. Galadriel. So I can't remember, but from what I understand, some people are saying she was just like an advisor. She was a seer. She was all this stuff. She was more like a wizard herself. I mean, she's not a wizard, but I mean, her powers were her strength. Whereas in this series, she actually is fighting. Like, she wears armor and she swings a sword and she does all this stuff. She's like Legolas, like going off into battle. So you're saying in the show she leads the army? People are just questioning whether that's true to the character or not. Like, would she have done that? On the other hand, if what I was saying is, okay, the elves are so long-lived. If she's not the combat type, maybe she had a character arc, a story arc. Maybe she saw the horrors of war and then realized, okay, I don't want to be part of that anymore. And so she becomes more this background character and focuses on her lore and magic rather than fighting. Or is there no room for that? Like, she was always that way, and so it's totally out of character, and that's why people are saying, like, what? After the burn the ships. Yeah, that whole thing about the ships burning, I don't know what that is, because I don't know that context. I know I read something and it mentioned it, but why were the ships burned? Who burned them? What was the context? I'd have to read a lot. I'd have to read like 300 pages. But I mean, the stories go back and forth. I mean, you get all that stuff about Beren and Luthien. You get this whole thing about Turambar. Let's see, the ruins of Doriath. But what I understand, I mean, I could be totally wrong, but it's like the world gets created. You've got this evil figure, this Melkor. He gets captured. He tricks a bunch of people. He gets a whole bunch of people corrupted. Sauron eventually comes to his side. They have the whole thing about the rings. They make the rings. But the Silmarils, there's all this stuff about people fighting over the Silmarils. The humans come. There's stuff about the dwarves, stuff about the elves. The Beren Luthien story, of course. So humans and elves coming together. Yeah, eventually you get the War of the Ring. Sauron tricks everybody because he gets them to, well, it's just like the story, how it always starts. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in the halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all and in the darkness bind them, in land of Mordor where the shadows lie. So that's Lord of the Rings. The 1 ring gets destroyed. But yeah, the storyline of the elves and their relationships. Like, in my reread of the Lord of the Rings, they have just done the Council of Elrond, and they're just about to set forth on their adventure. And so, and they shall be called the Fellowship of the Ring, is how, like, disc 1 of the movie, like, the DVD was split into 2 discs, and it's like, that's where it would have stopped. So, like, that's as far as I've gotten. So I've got a long ways to go. But I know that first meeting with Galadriel is really cool in the movie, and I can't remember at all what it was like in the book, so I'll have to go back through that. But certainly in the movie version, they give her a lot to do. They have her as a narrator. She tells the story. She definitely has a lot of presence. But as far as action, I mean, it's not like she leaps into battle and like kills a bunch of people. Yeah. All right. Well, I think I'm just rambling now. So thank you everyone for checking us out for this extra special, extra long, extended return for HeroQuest fans. We talked a lot of Lord of the Rings stuff. Check out our previous videos where we talk about the European version of HeroQuest, which I finally own, compared to the North American version, talking about these expansions, with lots of extras and stuff like that, which I never thought I'd own, thanks to the generosity of one of the longtime members of Board Game Geek, who was able to cut me a great deal. And there should be a lot more to come, a lot more cool stuff to talk about. Oh, I wanted to say one closing thing about PulseCon. So someone was taking the wind out of my sails and telling me, "Oh, don't get your hopes up about PulseCon. Like Gen Con is the big, where that was where all the big reveals were. PulseCon is probably all just going to be about HeroScape. I mean, let's be honest, HeroScape was huge, bigger than HeroQuest. It's all going to be focused on that. We're probably not going to hear anything or next to nothing about HeroQuest. So I don't know if that person was just trying to get, lower my expectations or what, but I mean, the last PulseCon we didn't get much. We just got the little teaser about the Frozen Horror. So don't be surprised if there's hardly anything at the end of September, beginning of October about HeroQuest. It's probably not going to be anything more than we already know. But on the other hand, they may show a couple pictures or something, or close-ups of the Rogue Heir of Elathorn, or something like that, and that'd be cool. But yeah. So Jacer is saying that she led an army after they burned the ships. So Jacer, my question was, are you talking about in the books or in the new TV show that happens? Or in both? She led an army. Because someone was telling me, no, she didn't lead the army. Elrond led the army in the book. But anyway, I'm too tired to look it back up again. So I guess we'll see. But yeah, definitely looking forward to the next Rantcast. Tomorrow, why don't you join us if you can? 6 to 10 p.m. Central Time here on HeroQuest Fans, live on Twitch, replay on YouTube. Join us on Discord, and we will play some HeroQuest. And who knows, maybe we'll start recruiting people for our eventual Space Crusade game one of these days. And yeah, maybe I'll check this game out and see what it's all about. I haven't done any live streaming on here yet. So I'll probably need to talk to Strange Bus about that. He offered to kind of help. All right, so thanks again, especially to our subs. Thank you, Alacidra. All roads lead to the alien, because of course they do. Angry Bit Games, Count Cogpox, and Jacer J, 22, of course. Check them out on YouTube, Warbuilder 22, I think. And Vorlani. All right, thanks everybody. Oh, I thought it was in the book. It might have been advisory, but I thought she was in combat. Well, see, that's the thing. I don't remember what Galadriel did. But I know in the movie portrayal, she's not a combat person. I mean, she has powers, but she doesn't fight. Now, I think in the Peter Jackson Hobbit, she does fight, like, I don't know, in the ethereal realm. She and Saruman and Gandalf, they all, like, fight the Necromancer, who, of course, is Sauron. I don't remember that from the Hobbit. I don't see, because some of the stuff that's in the movies is not in the books. But some of it is like either completely made up or is hinted at in like the appendices and stuff. So I'm going to have to read more to find out like what was Jackson's invention and what was like, oh, it could have happened. But I just know that from what people are saying of the Rings of Power, a lot of that stuff is not in the books at all. But I'm curious because yeah, you do definitely get people who have strong opinions about it, but I assume they're not just making it up. But the question is, how well do they know the lore? Maybe they got confused too. Yeah. Well, anyway, Yeah, in the sections I read, there was nothing about Galadriel fighting, but whether or not that makes sense for her character, I don't know. But again, she's thousands of years old, so maybe at one time she was a combat person, and then she could have like changed or at a different focus. She got the knee injury, so she couldn't fight anymore. She had to go into statecraft instead. Just kidding. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll keep reading. But yeah, definitely keep reading Lord of the Rings. But I won't get it all read by the time of the next rant cast. So I'll still be kind of like coming at it like a noob. I mean, let's be real. It just will be. But the thing is, like, when you're going to make a movie or a TV show and it's based on such a beloved property, yeah, there's a lot of responsibility you have. And if you set the expectation like, okay, this is going to be a fan fiction, this is just loosely inspired by, this is not true to the lore. Like, if you're going to say it's true to the lore, you better deliver, is what I would say. But you can't, like, when you make a movie, you can't expect the average viewer to, like, have read a whole bunch of books and comics and played a bunch of video games to be able to understand it. Like, it should just tell its own story. It should be self-contained. It should make sense. I mean, maybe that stuff would enhance it, but it can't cover for like flaws in it. So that's why, like, even though I love the David Lynch Dune movie, I understand the people that criticize it and say, well, it's confusing. There's a lot of stuff that isn't explained. It doesn't make sense. When you read the books, it does. But it's like that's a flaw that the movie wasn't able to convey it well enough that you had to read the book to get it. Or if you read the book, you're expecting to see it and then you don't get it, or it's dumbed down, it's watered down. So, I mean, at the same time, like, we'll always have these. We'll always have these, even if this Rings of Power thing just, turns out to be just garbage, or it goes nowhere, or whatever. I mean, they spend so much money, they have to really pull off a winner, I would think. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, for my part, I just want to set my expectations as, okay, here's what Tolkien intended, and now let's see what Amazon has to say. And if it's no good, no worries. I didn't lose anything. Just go back to what's good. Just like with Star Wars, if the new Star Wars is disappointing, guess what? I've got the old Star Wars. If the new Hero Quest is disappointing, guess what? I got the old. But I also want to kind of see, like, okay, what would the average person be able to do? Like, anybody can go to the bookstore and grab this and read it if they want to. But, a lot of people are just going to watch that, and that's all they know of Lord of the Rings. Or maybe they won't because they won't care because they have no idea. But probably they've seen the Peter Jackson movies or they've heard of the Reputation and want to go, oh, okay, well, here's the latest official thing. Let's see what it is. All right, everybody. We'll just go ahead and end the stream now. Thank you again. This was kind of a longer one, but yeah, kind of making up for lost time. So we'll see you tomorrow, and hopefully we can have some fun playing around the table. I'm sure we will. And next weekend, it should go to more of a normal schedule, unless something comes up, of course, because life happens when you're making plans. But yeah, should be good. All right, I've had a great time. Thanks for staying up with us. All right, everybody, take care now. Good night.